All right, so they say that if you know who's going to be, if it's a foregone conclusion, hey, you know who's going number 1 in the draft, you know who's going number 2 in the draft, it says, when does the draft start? For you guys, when does the draft start? Cam Ward's going 1.
Number 2.
Yeah, okay. So it still is open to the potential, even though the feeling is, well, it's going to be Abdul Carter at 2.
Is it?
Well, I mean, if you believe DraftKings, if you believe the betting odds, it's been heavily favoring Abdul Carter.
It's early, though.
I know.
It's early. And those have been wrong this early. And I'm not saying that Abdul Carter doesn't deserve to be taking that slot, and that wouldn't make a lot of sense. But we don't know. The reality is we don't know what Cleveland's going to do. Their cap situation's a mess. It sounds like from all reports that they would like to trade for Cousins, but again, taking on his cap hit ain't going to happen. And Atlanta's got to figure out a way of dealing with it. I don't want to call it a mistake with what they did last year, but I'm not sure in the front office how you justify that to your owner, Arthur Blank. When you sign Kirk Cousins to, in essence, really a 2-year deal, because it was 2 years of fully, guaranteed in that full guarantees in that contract, you thought you were committing to him for that. And then once you draft Penix in the top 10, it's like, well, this never works. Usually if you take a guy in the top 10 like that, you're going to play him. At least that's what history has told us. And that's how it ended up playing out. So now they find themselves with a quarterback who's a really expensive backup, or call it an insurance policy if Penix gets hurt. But they can't even move on from him because of the way they structured it and the cap hit a team like the Browns would take. So we keep going back to, and this isn't like against Raheem Morris, but all parties involved in Atlanta who persuaded Arthur Blank away from Bill Belichick. I don't think Bill Belichick would have made the moves that Atlanta made last offseason. And they probably would be in a much different position right now. I'm not sure, look, you could say they might be worse, but I don't know. Probably not. It's not like you go back and look at last year in Atlanta and go, oh yeah, that was, really can't. It wasn't like they built really much of a foundation off anything. We head into this offseason, like you still have questions about it. Like, does anyone have a good feel for what Atlanta's going to be this year?
No.
I would assume better rather than worse, though. I'd assume that they're most likely going to contend for the South Division.
But why?
Why
are they going to be better than the Saints if Derek Carr's there and healthy, and Kellen Moore who's got more offensive prowess?
Yes.
Tampa, who won it last year.
I don't know about Tampa. I do not know.
I mean,
about
Carolina's
Tampa.
the only team. I think it's fair to say they would be better than. It's Carolina.
And Carolina
outside of that,
might improve. They started to improve a little bit. They showed some signs of improvement towards the end of the season.
But I bet if we looked at the odds right now for that division, Carolina would be last. Tampa's probably first. And you probably have a close tie or whatever between Atlanta and, looking at the rest of it. Like, I look at it and go, they've put themselves in this position now. And it leads me to think like the Browns probably would rather have Kirk Cousins at this point. I think based on how things went, he's a fit for Stefanski. There's a pass there.
Did you see the Arthur Blank comments about Kirk Cousins? So he was talking this week, and The Athletic reported on it. He said, quote, one of the things you learn as you live life is there's no point in living in the past. Obviously, at the time, we made a commitment to Kirk, and Kirk did to us. Circumstances were extraordinarily different than they are today. Not his fault, not our fault. Sometimes life doesn't develop the way you want it to develop. Then he went on to say, quote, we've already paid him. I've never been a risk-averse type of person. I think the plan to sign Cousins and draft Penix was an excellent plan from our standpoint, and from Kirk's standpoint, he made a wise financial investment. So he's basically just saying, listen, tough balls, man. You made a bunch of money. All right, so things could be worse, and they're just going to hold on to him until they get a deal that they think makes sense to them. So I don't know if it's holding him hostage. But
all that is draft compensation.
Yeah.
I mean, here's what's going to happen. It's going to be the Falcons paying for a substantial portion of Cousins' contract or whatever is left on it, however they work that out, and the Browns giving up a high draft pick for him. So it's going to look like on paper like, oh, the Browns gave up a second-round pick or, whatever it is, a third and a sixth for Kirk Cousins. But really they're buying. those draft picks. I mean, yes, Kirk Cousins comes along with that. He would play well in that system for them. But that's also the other portion to all this. And that's like what the NFL hates, like letting it become public, because they don't want it to be perceived that teams are able to buy draft picks. Like there's not a price tag on them, even though we've seen examples of that in the past.
I wonder, because the quarterback's conversation is such a large one for Cleveland, why hasn't there been more talk about possibly taking Shedeur at 2? Why not? I mean, if you think about it, you're strapped with Deshaun Watson. He may return this season. Who knows at what point in time he does return, and if he does, do you even want to play him? Like, I mean, now hearing the owner say that was a miss, with Deshaun Watson, it almost is, again, I feel like they freed Stefanski and this team from the bondage of Deshaun Watson. And so now if you're moving on, I could look at Kirk Cousins, but how much of a solution is Kirk Cousins for us long term? That would be my biggest concern right now, because of, I guess, the way it kind of ended for him in Atlanta. So if I have the number 2 overall pick, why wouldn't I entertain knowing that Shedeur Sanders is going to be there? I don't know why that's not more of a conversation, because in fact, we're looking at the New York Giants. That's a team that needs a quarterback. We're looking at the New Orleans Saints, but really the New Orleans Saints have a quarterback. So I don't know that that's quite a need for them, a necessity in the draft. And then you look at the Raiders. They brought in Geno, and they just gave him a nice deal, but it does say that it's probably a bridge contract for him to get to another quarterback, buy time for another quarterback to develop. If I'm sitting there and I know that there's a strong possibility that Shedeur Sanders could end up going 6 to the Las Vegas Raiders because they feel like he can be the quarterback of the future for them, why would I not seriously, and I mean seriously, kick the tires around on taking him at number 2? You don't have to pay him. He's going to be on a rookie contract. It gives you time to figure out what you're going to do with Deshaun Watson while you're figuring out what you're going to do or developing and creating what you're going to create with Shedeur Sanders. I feel like that makes sense if you really look at it.
So there was an article written on Fox Sports. Ralph Vacchiano said that the Giants are convinced that Ward and Sanders are going to go 1 and 2, and that they're going to miss out on both. And that was again, this could all be a load of garbage. Like somebody fed him that, not to dismiss his reporting, but somebody could have fed him that, and it could be from the Giants standpoint. But at least he feels like there's a real possibility, which goes back to the original question, where does the draft start? It does, like Cleveland is, like there's a lot of options there for Cleveland. If Cam Ward's gone, like you could go quarterback, you could go, who's the best player between Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter? And then the Giants are kind of sitting there at 3, left holding whatever's left over from Cleveland. So it feels like they're,
It definitely starts at 2, because I don't think there's a foregone conclusion as to who's going to go at number 2. And does Cleveland, if Cleveland is going to trade for Kirk Cousins, do they try to get more draft value? Do they trade out of the pick? Maybe there is a team that wants Shedeur Sanders really badly and is willing to give up, give something up of tremendous value to the Cleveland Browns, and they trade out of it and get Kirk Cousins and still get the player that they may want in the draft. I mean, it's possible it could play out that way.
Yeah, if I'm Kevin Stefanski, I'll take my chances with Kirk Cousins and hope that we pull the trigger on that as opposed to trying to go with a rookie. Because if the Browns struggle this year, Stefanski's done.
I don't know. I don't know that that's true.
I think he's gone if they struggle this year.
I do not know that that's true. And I think, again, I'll double down on saying the owner coming out and taking the somewhat of the blame, at least including himself in the blame of what they did with Deshaun Watson, it totally ruined the chemistry of that team. It took them off balance. You have this amazing roster of players And there was one element that kept coming up short and really tore this team apart from the seams, and it was who they brought in as quarterback. The best decision they would have made is keeping that roster together the way it was with Baker Mayfield as the quarterback, and I think they know that. Stefanski was winning Coach of the Year during that time. You don't just go away from him because of a decision that the organization made that derailed what it was that he was doing culturally. So to me, I don't think that he goes on. He would have to have a meltdown of a season. They would have to really, really stink really, really bad with no return, in my estimation, if Stefanski were to be let go after this season, if it wasn't a winning year, so to speak.